They said I'd never amount to anything. I became a lawyer. I found this thread through a colleague who mentioned it at a conference. I went home and found it that night. I stayed up until 3 in the morning reading. This is mine. Hi, my name is Sarah. I'm 34 years old. I'm a licensed attorney. I own my car, my apartment, and every piece of furniture in it. I have a retirement account, a savings account, and a credit score I am genuinely proud of. I'm telling you that up front because this story starts in a place that looks nothing like that, and I want you to know where it ends before we go back to where it began. I grew up in Greensboro, North Carolina, in a house that looked fine from the outside. 3 bedrooms, a yard, a minivan in the driveway. My father, Richard, worked in logistics. My mother, Diane, worked part-time at a dental billing office. We were not poor. We were not struggling. From the outside, we probably looked completely ordinary. Inside was a different story. My father had a temper that arrived before he did. You could feel it before you heard his car in the driveway. The air in the house would change. My younger sister, Becca, and I had a system. If his truck pulled in before 6, we went to our rooms. If he was already on his second drink by dinner, we ate fast and disappeared. We didn't talk about it. We didn't name it. It was just the weather we lived in. My mother managed him the way you manage something you've stopped believing you can change. She adjusted, she smoothed, she apologized on his behalf before he even finished a sentence. She had been doing it so long, she didn't know how to do anything else. And she didn't know how to protect us from it either. I don't think she knew that was something a mother was supposed to do. I was 13 when I understood, clearly and without any confusion, that no one in that house was going to save me. So I decided to save myself. I just needed a plan. The library became my place, not in a romantic way, in a practical one. It was quiet, it was free. The librarian, Miss Portia, was a small woman in her 60s who wore reading glasses on a beaded chain and never once asked me why I was there so much. She just pointed me toward things: a book on debate, a section on careers, a display about financial aid one October that I stood in front of for 20 minutes reading every single pamphlet. I was 14 when I first read about pre-law programs. I didn't fully understand what they were, but I understood that lawyers made arguments and got paid for it, that they needed to know the rules of the system, and that the system had rules. That last part mattered to me more than I could explain at the time. At home, rules were whatever my father decided they were that day. At school, at least, the rules were written down. I wanted to live somewhere the rules were written down. I started keeping notes and making lists of information I needed to research. How do you become a lawyer? How much does law school cost? What is work-study? What do you study in college first? What is the LSAT? I took my notes to the library and looked up every question one at a time. Miss Portia helped me find a book about pre-law programs that a college student had donated. It was 3 years out of date, but it gave me a map. I also had a school laptop I was allowed to bring home. I used it for everything. I found free typing tutorials and got my speed up to 65 words per minute by the time I was 15, thinking it would matter. I watched videos on how to write professionally. I found a site called Coursera that offered free courses from real universities, and I took an Intro to Law course that a professor had posted for free. I made lists of legal terms and wrote them out over and over. I watched courtroom dramas. I listened to people talk about public speaking. I even had a digital mood board of what to wear as a lawyer. I am not telling you I was some kind of prodigy. I was a scared kid in a bad house who had found the one thing that made her feel like the future was real. I held on to it with everything I had. When I was 15, I found a platform where people hired others for odd jobs, and I learned everything about it. I was too young to register, but I filed it away. I would be ready when I turned 18. What I could do at 15 was write. I had always been good at it. My English teacher, Mr. Delaney, told me in 9th grade that I wrote with more clarity than most adults he knew. I didn't know what to do with that compliment at the time, but I didn't forget it. I started looking up freelance writing. I made an account with my school email and listed myself as a student writer offering proofreading and basic blog editing. It sounds laughable now. At the time, it felt enormous. My first order came 2 weeks later. A small business owner wanted someone to proofread a page of website copy. I did it in 40 minutes, and she left me a 5-star review. I printed it out and put it in my notes. By the time I was 16, I was making between $40 and $80 a month doing proofreading, editing, and writing simple product descriptions. I kept every dollar in a savings account I had opened at a credit union with my mother's cosign, which she gave me without telling my father. That account was mine. He didn't know it existed. I didn't spend a dollar of it. I also started learning about grant writing through a free video channel run by a nonprofit consultant. I didn't fully understand it yet, but I understood the structure. You identified a need, you explained how you would meet it, you showed that you were qualified, you asked for the money with evidence. It sounded exactly like writing a legal brief, though I didn't know that yet. Junior year, I joined the debate team, not because it looked good on a college application, though it did, because I needed to practice making arguments out loud without flinching. My coach, Mr. Osei, was a former public defender who'd moved into teaching after 15 years in the courtroom. He ran practice like a courtroom. No filler, no apologies. State your position, support it, respond to the opposition, close. He pulled me aside after my third tournament. He said I had good instincts, but I was hedging, softening my language when I didn't need to. He said, "You argue like someone who expects to be interrupted. Stop leaving room for it." I thought about that for a long time. He was right. I had spent my whole life leaving room for my father to interrupt, override, dismiss. I had built that pause into everything I said. Unlearning it took years, but Mr. Osei was the first person who named it, even if he didn't know what he was naming. Senior year, I applied to 7 colleges. All of them had strong pre-law tracks. All of them were in state for tuition purposes. I applied for every scholarship I could find, including 3 small local ones through the library's bulletin board that Miss Portia had quietly circled for me. I wrote every application essay myself, revised them with Mr. Delaney, and submitted everything before Thanksgiving. I got into UNC Greensboro with a partial merit scholarship and a Pell Grant that together covered just over half my tuition. It was not a full ride, but it was enough to start. My father told me college was a waste of time and that I should get a job and contribute to the household. My mother said nothing. Becca, who was 14, hugged me in the hallway outside my room after dinner and whispered that she was proud of me. I left for UNCG that August with 2 suitcases, my notes, and $4,216 in my savings account. I did not cry when I drove away. I had been leaving that house in my mind for 5 years. The physical part was almost easy. UNCG was not a particularly prestigious school. I think people sometimes tell stories like mine and make it sound like talent alone opens doors. It doesn't. Strategy opens doors. I chose UNCG because it was affordable, because it had a strong political science department with professors who had real legal careers, and because it was close enough to home that I could check on Becca without having to fly anywhere. I majored in political science with a minor in English. I kept my grade point average above 3.8 every semester. I went to every professor's office hours at least once. I asked questions. I introduced myself. I was not the smartest person in my classes, but I was the most prepared and I was always there. I also kept working. I registered on a job platform for odd jobs the week I turned 18 and started picking up jobs on weekends, furniture assembly mostly. Between that and my continued freelance writing, I was making between $600 and $900 a month outside of class. I lived in the cheapest dorm my freshman year and moved into a room in a house with 3 other students sophomore year, $450 a month, including utilities. I cooked most of my own food. I bought my textbooks secondhand or found them through the library's course reserve system. I did not have a social life that cost money. I had a social life that happened in the campus dining hall and at free events and on long walks with my roommate, Jess, who was pre-med and understood exactly what it meant to be building something on very little margin for error. Jess became one of my closest friends. She is still one of my closest friends. She is now a pediatric resident in Durham, and we still talk every week. I took the LSAT the summer before my senior year. I had been preparing for 8 months. I used a free LSAT prep course through a partnership with the Law School Admission Council and bought one used prep book from a thrift store. I took every practice test I could find. I studied in the library on Sunday mornings before anyone else arrived. I scored a 163. That is in the 88th percentile. It was not going to get me into Yale, but it was going to get me into a very good law school, and I'd been doing my research for years on exactly which schools offered the most generous merit scholarships to students with my profile. I applied to 8 law schools. Campbell University School of Law offered me a merit scholarship that covered 60% of tuition. I accepted. I called Becca that night. She was 17. She cried. I told her to start her own notebook. Law school was the hardest thing I have ever done. I want to say that clearly because I think the story of a self-made person can start to sound like a highlight reel if you're not careful. It was not a highlight reel. It was 3 years of reading until my eyes ached, of outlining cases at midnight, of sitting in the library on holidays because the library was open and my apartment was quiet, and quiet meant I could work. I clerked at a small civil rights nonprofit my second year through a school placement program. Unpaid, but the experience was worth more than money at that point. My supervisor there, an attorney named Diana Reeves, was the first lawyer I had ever worked directly under. She was methodical and unsentimental, and she had zero tolerance for imprecision. She marked up my memos in red ink and handed them back without apology. I loved every second of it. Third year, I got a part-time paid position with a small plaintiff's firm in Raleigh, doing research and drafting. $18 an hour, 15 hours a week. It wasn't much, but it kept me from dipping into my savings, and it gave me real work product to show when I graduated. I passed the North Carolina bar on my first attempt. I found out on a Tuesday morning and sat at my kitchen table for a long time just breathing. I was 26 years old, a licensed attorney, and I had done it without a single dollar from my family. I want you to understand what that meant. It meant that no one in that house had any claim on what I had built. Not one piece of it had their fingerprints on it. Every scholarship I had written for myself. Every exam I had studied for alone. Every odd job. Every proofread document. Every furniture assembly in a stranger's apartment on a Saturday morning. Mine. All of it mine. I took a position at a mid-size firm in Raleigh doing employment law. Starting salary, $68,000. I rented a one-bedroom apartment, bought a used Honda Civic with a loan I qualified for entirely on my own, and started paying down my remaining law school debt with the focus of someone who had been waiting years to feel solid ground under her feet. My father did not know where I lived. I had not given him my address. My mother had it, and I trusted her not to share it, which was the one thin thread of trust I still extended to her. Becca was in her second year at NC State by then, on her own scholarship. We talked every week. She had gotten out too. I had been at the firm for about a year when it happened. There was a fundraiser for a local civic organization. One of the partners at my firm was on the board, and a group of us were invited to attend. It was held at a hotel ballroom downtown. Nice event. Open bar, round tables, the kind of thing where you spend the first hour making small talk with people whose names you immediately forget. I was standing near the back of the room with a colleague when I heard my name. Not my professional name, my childhood name, the nickname my father used, the one that always had an edge to it, the one I'd stopped answering to the day I left Greensboro. I turned around. My father was standing 10 feet away, in a sport coat I didn't recognize, holding a drink, smiling the smile he used when there was an audience. He looked older, softer around the face, but the eyes were the same. Beside him was my mother, who looked at me with an expression I can only describe as braced. My father crossed the room before I could process what was happening. He was loud. He was warm in the performed way he got when he wanted something. He put his hand on my shoulder and turned to the people around us and said, "This is my daughter. She's a lawyer now. We always knew she'd do something great." I felt the room tilt slightly. I heard those words, "We always knew, we always knew." I looked at him. I kept my voice completely level. I said, "You told me college was a waste of time. You told me I should stay home and get a job. You told me I would never amount to anything." The smile didn't leave his face immediately. It took a second, like a light on a dimmer. He started to say something. I didn't let him. I said, "I put myself through school. I took the LSAT alone. I applied to law school alone. I passed the bar alone. You didn't know where I was living for 3 years. You don't get to stand in a room full of people and tell them you always knew." My colleague had gone very still beside me. The people at the nearest table had stopped their conversation. My mother said my name softly, not to correct me, just to say it. My father's face had done the thing it did at home when the weather changed. I had spent my entire childhood watching for that change and adjusting myself around it. Standing in that ballroom in a blazer I had bought with money I earned, surrounded by colleagues who knew me as competent and serious and precise, I felt absolutely nothing about it. I said, "Enjoy your drink, since that has always been your priority," and I walked away. I did not shake, I did not cry. I got a glass of water from the bar, rejoined my table, and spent the rest of the evening talking to a family law attorney from Durham who was very funny and became a professional contact I still have to this day. My mother called me the next morning. She said my father had been embarrassed. I told her he should be. She said he was hurt. I told her I was hurt as a child too, until I realized that didn't matter to either of them. She asked if I thought what I had done was fair. I thought about that for a moment. Then I said, he stood in a room full of people and tried to take credit for something he actively tried to stop. I corrected the record. That is what I do for a living. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "You've changed." I said, "Yes, I have." She asked if we could have lunch sometime. I said I would think about it. I have had lunch with her twice since then. The conversations are careful. We don't go back to the old house in our talking. She has never apologized, and I have stopped waiting for her to. She is trying, in the limited way she knows how, and I am choosing, in a measured way, to leave a small door open, not for her sake, for mine, because I get to decide what that door looks like now. She doesn't. My father has not contacted me since that night. I don't know if he will. I find that I don't think about it much. Becca graduated from NC State last spring with a degree in public health. She is applying to graduate programs. She called me the night she submitted her last application, and we stayed on the phone for 2 hours just talking. At one point, she said, "I don't think I would have known it was possible if I hadn't watched you do it." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just said, "It's possible. It's hard and it's slow, and some days it feels like nothing is moving, but it's possible." I am 34 now. I made partner at a small employment law firm in Raleigh 2 years ago. I handle workplace discrimination and wrongful termination cases. I spend my days arguing on behalf of people who were treated as disposable by the systems and institutions that were supposed to protect them. I did not plan it that way, but I am not surprised that's where I ended up. I still have the notes, the original ones from the library. The pages are soft at the edges, and some of the ink has faded. The first page says, in 14-year-old handwriting, "How do you become a lawyer?" I know the answer now. You decide you're leaving, you find the library, you ask every question you have, and you write down every answer. You use every free tool, every free course, every free hour you can find. You save every dollar. You take the test, you take it again if you have to, you find the people who see what you're doing and you let them help you. You do not wait for anyone to believe in you first. And when the person who told you you would never amount to anything tries to stand in a room full of people and claim credit for what you built, you correct the record, quietly, clearly, without flinching. And then you go back to your table and you enjoy the rest of your evening, because you've earned it.